On behalf of Cambridge Health Tech Institute's SCOPE Global Web Symposia Series and our sponsor, Reify Health, I'd like to welcome you to Enrolling, a global study ahead of schedule during a pandemic. My name is Elizabeth Lamb, and I'm the host and technical director for today's event. Now, I would like to introduce our presenter. He is Ralph Passarella, CEO and co-founder of Reify Health. Ralph, the webinar is yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Elizabeth. And I think maybe to start here, you'll notice that there are two people on the slide here, and Elizabeth will introduce one of us. Unfortunately, Riddhi, my co-presenter, a few hours ago had a pretty serious personal emergency that came up. And, so first and foremost, our thoughts right now are with her and her family as they navigate it. And she and I kind of quickly discussed whether or not we should reschedule, and decided out of respect for everybody's time, so for all you here, that we should just go ahead and do the webinar today and have me speak to the talking points that Riddhi had planned to share. So in addition to those talking points that we'll be sharing throughout, Riddhi wanted to make sure I let everybody know that she was very excited to share our work that we've done together on behalf of Amgen with all you guys, and disappointed that she's not here today to be a part of it. So I'm going to try to do my best to step in and share some of that really exciting content on her behalf. When it comes to the Q&A, please do still submit questions for Riddhi in the Amgen team. I'm not going to speak directly to many or any of those, but we're going to make sure they get to the Amgen team for a response. So in summary, you'll still hear the content that Riddhi and I plan to share, but you are stuck with me monologuing for the next 25 to 30 minutes about enrolling clinical trials during a pandemic. So with all of that as context, let's go ahead and get started. As most everyone on the call here is very well aware, like the slide says, trials are challenging to enroll in the best of times. So study startup, managing to enrollment targets and expectations versus what we actually see delivered can be extremely challenging. There are many activities that companies, Amgen, others do ahead of opening up a study that are aimed at ensuring trials enroll on plan or even sometimes ahead of schedule. But a lot of times those things are not sufficient to ensure the enrollment targets are met. And I think even more than that, so further to these sort of standard challenges that companies face with enrollment. The world here has been faced with significant challenges that are very obvious to everybody in the call here with the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we've all been impacted personally by this, but I think also everybody in the call to some degree has been impacted professionally as well. And clinical trials are absolutely no exception to that. And so the level of complexity for opening a study and enrolling a study effectively has gone up tremendously in the last year. And so what we're going to be talking about today is how Amgen focused on getting the study up and running and what tactics they employed to actually enroll a study, not just on time, but as you'll see here, perhaps ahead of schedule actually during the pandemic. And so before we get into any of the specific details of what the Amgen team did, we're going to start with a brief overview of the study. So this is the study we'll be talking about. The data are going to be presented for a double-blind study in the general medicines therapeutic area at Amgen, which it was run in 7 countries, approximately 300 subjects. And the target enrollment time for the study was 9 months. And something that should be no surprise to anybody, there was an objective to expedite enrollment as much as possible. Ideally, enroll it in 9 months, just like the plan. And so the Amgen team focused on implementing a few strategies to do that, to actually expedite enrollment, to hit that enrollment target. And we bucketed them here. Riddhi has bucketed them into sort of 3 categories. The first being good site selection. So the Amgen team ensured the initial outreach to countries and sites really focused on collecting very robust data that allowed them to do feasibility and site evaluation really effectively. It was really critical for them to focus on, especially during the pandemic, I guess, some of the caveats and requirements for study procedures, and also the patient journey was really well understood by the Amgen team and by sites. And so the study team put together a questionnaire for sites to comment up front on any of the challenges that sites envisioned the trial facing, as it opened enrollment. And then they gave themselves a lot of lead time to begin to mitigate some of those risks. And then they focused on conducting really in-depth country and site level feasibility to evaluate which sites could confidently contribute in the environment that we were in at the time. The second category, which like good site selection is something that's super familiar to probably everyone on this call, really efficient study startup. And so this is something, study startup is something that, again, is complex in the simplest of times. And so the Amgen team here, some of the things they focused on were ensuring prompt vendor setup, really expedited submissions, approvals where possible. Something they did in response to the pandemic was also to ensure that they resourced the study startup activities adequately. So really ensuring, taking the approach of a mindset of knowing they were walking into uncertainty and ensuring that they at least had resources available to deal with whatever challenges kind of came their way as they started the study up. And so these first two categories here, good site selection, efficient study startup, these are things that the Amgen team focused on. This is not unique to Amgen. Maybe some of the specific tactics on the margins were during the pandemic. And then the third category of sort of intervention or initiative was the initiative that Amgen and ReifY Health collaborated on with this study, in particular and other studies at Amgen, ReifY Health's product study team. So Amgen implemented the study team platform, which is a system designed to support more efficient, more effective pre-screening, screening, enrollment at sites, reduce burden on those sites, make it easier for them to focus on the things that they need to do to participate in the study, and then study team gives the Amgen team really good visibility into what's happening. So that Amgen can see during these really uncertain times, what are some of the challenges we're facing now that the study is up and running and live? What are the things that we can do to get enrollment back on track? And so these are the three things that, from Riddy's perspective and the Amgen team's perspective, they focused on. And then today's presentation is really going to drill into that last one, the joint presentation between ReifY Health and Amgen here, how we implemented study team on the study, how it works, and then how it contributed to the study overall. And so this is, to break the fourth wall for everybody here a little bit, this is the point of the presentation where Riddy would actually hand things over to me. And so that's what we're going to do, is now dive into a little bit about study team and start with why, before we actually built anything, some of the things that we saw in the clinical trial landscape that inspired us to do what we do. So this first slide here, there's a recruitment enrollment funnel that looks, again, very familiar, I'm sure, to most people on the call. The question at the top is a question that every sponsor representative in clinical operations I've ever talked to in my entire life has asked and cares about answering very well. So what are the things that we can do to increase screening enrollment? Two of those things that are very common we talked about in the previous slide. So really good feasibility and site selection. That's something that Amgen, along with every other sponsor we've ever encountered, cares about, focuses on, along with really efficient study startup. Then if sponsors want to sort of double down and say, or what else can we do to increase enrollment, to ensure that we're hitting our enrollment targets? The thing that comes to most people's mind is, let's fill the top of the funnel. Let's find more patients, right? Let's identify more patients that we can refer to our sites from outside of their practices. That is an effective strategy, especially in certain indications. It is also not the only approach, the only thing that you can do. And so one of the things that we did at ReifY was say, well, let's actually take a closer look first before we dive too deeply into what we think are the problems. Let's really make sure we understand what the recruitment enrollment funnel actually look like. And so as we started to talk to sites and sponsors and really try to get our heads around the data, we started to see a picture that looks a little bit more like what you see on the screen here. And so the first key difference I want to point out on the left, you'll see that there's a pretty big drop-off between the patients that could participate or that have been identified and patients that sort of make it through to the next step and ultimately to screening. And so as we've actually scaled to a really large number of sites and run a number of studies now, our data have started to tell us that up to a third of patients that could be pre-screened, that could be ultimately enrolled in a study, are never actioned beyond that sort of initial patient identification step. Right? And that is a massive opportunity for us as an industry to improve. And it makes sense when you talk to sites. So um, we have asked sites to do an enormous number of, to take on an enormous number of responsibilities as an industry. And the volume of responsibility we have given sites has grown, and it is continuing to grow. The complexity of protocols continues to grow. And imagine it, like, put yourself in the shoes of a research coordinator for a second, for everybody who isn't a research coordinator on the call. You show up to work and you have two patients coming in for visit, one for visit 3 and one for visit 8 for a different protocol, right, on Wednesday. And you have to do a lot of work to prepare for those visits. You have to do work during the visits, and there's a ton of work after the visits as well to make sure that everything's documented appropriately. Those activities must happen according to schedule, right? Pre-screening, screening, I should say, like this patient identification, pre-screening, chart review work. Those are the kinds of activities that get put on the back burner in favor of these things that absolutely must happen. And so sites have these multiple conflicting priorities, and that's a problem that's getting worse. And we hear from sites, I don't actually have time to even engage with all of the patients in my practice, or to make sure that we're following up with all of the patients that we could because of all of the work they have on their plates. And the second thing that we saw that really emerged as we talked to site after site and started talking to sponsors is that the sponsors don't have visibility into this, have never had good visibility into what's going on. And so sponsors, there are patients that could be moved along the recruitment process that are not. And then there are a lot of patients that fall out before they make it to screening for reasons that ultimately could be avoided, either with protocol amendments or through better kind of outreach and better messaging. And then sponsors don't actually have visibility into which tactics that they're employing are working well either. Sometimes the most effective strategy is just to reimburse sites more for chart review. I promise you they will do the work if they can. And there are a lot of opportunities that for sponsors to take action if we can give them data to allow them to see what's going on, not just during the screening and randomization parts of the clinical trial, but this kind of upstream part of the process too. And so the next slide here summarizes, I think I spent a lot of time like saying things that we summarize in these 3 circles here. So basically sites have a lot of work to do and they have conflicting priorities. Sponsors have never been able to easily and effectively see that or see that well enough. They lack visibility of what's going on. And the end result is an ecosystem where patients that could benefit from participating in a clinical trial could be a good participant, never enroll. And that's a problem. And so what we've tried to do at Reify Health, what we've aimed to do is begin to tackle this first by focusing on the people who are actually doing the work, the research coordinators, the patient recruiters, the investigators, sub-investigators who are actually interfacing with patients. And first and foremost, we aim to give them tools to help them do their job better. And then to give them tools that make it easy for them to communicate with sponsors and help sponsors actually see and get visibility into what's going on at sites globally. And through that, our hypothesis years ago and what we've actually started seeing now in the data we have, we actually see that we can help sites enroll more effectively, more efficiently. And we can give sponsors data that help them make more informed decisions faster. And so the next few slides are going to be a little bit about sort of a before and after. So that, again, this is sort of day in the life of a site and sort of how things looked from Amgen's perspective and from the site's perspective before we started working together and partnering, and then after. And then we'll get into some of the results we saw on this on the study in particular. So from a site's perspective, every single site on the planet has one or more places where they track their work internally. Clinical trial management software, Excel spreadsheets, papers, sticky notes. There are a lot of places where sites track their work. Exactly 0 of those places have been easy, have made it easy been easy for sponsors to access and see what's going on. So for sites to share information with the sponsor requires sites to copy information to another place, to add information to a pre-screen log and send it in once a week manually. That is extra work for sites that is a pain. It also means that a lot of times, again, tasks can get put to the back burner. So not all sites do it for very reasonable, good reasons all the time. From the sponsor's perspective, they're taking these kind of manual logs and anecdotes from phone calls that CRAs are making to sites and trying to sort of mash that up with IVRS data they're getting about screening randomization. And it's really hard to get a picture of what's going on globally. CRAs get some of this information on the phone from research coordinators. By the time it makes it up to a local team lead, a regional leader, by the time it makes it up to the global trial manager, a lot of the really important information is lost along the way. And so there's been this really kind of challenging blind spot. And from the site perspective, they have patients from their own practice. Then when on a study where a sponsor also adds advertising or referrals, patient referrals from another source, sites are doing work to bring all of these different kind of streams of potential patients into the place where they do their job. And so where we started at Reify Health was this kind of site workflow. And what we said was, how can we make it possible for sites to do their job efficiently, effectively in a place, make it easy for them to get patients into their workflow, and then make it easy for them to share data with sponsors. And so what you're seeing here on the screen, we have two products. One is called Study Team for Sites. It's a system that sites can use for free across as many of their trials as they want, whether a sponsor like Amgen is using it or not. And we focus together. We think it's important because our number one priority has been making Study Team, making a product that really can be a site system that doesn't go away after the trial's over. And then we focus on making it easy for sites to get patients from all kinds of different sources into the system. And from there, we can make it easy for sites to share information back to Amgen with other sponsors. So the site product is connected with the sponsor product. And this, as we mentioned earlier, there's been a challenge getting this information has always been kind of equivalent to increasing site burden. With Study Team, what we really try to do is make it sort of more like the digital exhaust of the site's work is made visible to the sponsor. So the same data that Amgen would see about all this recruitment activity is just available at their fingertips without the site having to do more work. And then we combine the IXRS data so that Amgen staff do less work to see what's going on, and sites are doing less work to share this information back with Amgen. And so there's an important call out here at the bottom of the slide too, that sites have the option of using Study Team. So one of the things we're illustrating here on the next slide, sites are not required, when a sponsor uses Study Team, sites are not required to use it. Something I try to echo to our team internally a lot. It is not a site's job to use Study Team. It is only a site's job to tell us whether or not they want to use Study Team. It is our job to build something very useful for them they want to use. And so what we've focused on doing is not just making something useful and giving it to the sites that want to use it, but also making it easy for sites that don't want to use something, that view this a new system as extra burden, or they don't want to change for one reason or another to a new place. They're happy with the way they work today. That is totally okay. And we allow them to go with the exact same process that they would have gone with without Study Team. And then we ingest that data for the sponsor. So the end result here is that Amgen is getting kind of end-to-end visibility into recruitment and enrollment. And sites are actually able to work the way that they want to work. And they're able to build sort of their operations internally the way they want to. And then we at Reify Health can continue to focus on improving that and making it easier and more helpful for the sites that we work with, and creating things that are valuable for the sites that opt to use maybe an Excel spreadsheet or a traditional pre-screen log otherwise. And so that's how Study Team works and how it works from the site's perspective, and also kind of how it gives Amgen the data that they need to be able to make the kinds of decisions that contribute to faster enrollment. And so this is the point of the presentation where I would actually shut up and I would hand it back to Riddhi and let her talk about some of the results that we saw and that she and her team saw. So as we mentioned earlier, the target enrollment period for the study was 9 months. I am sure she is much more excited than I am to report that because of all the hard work that she and her team did, enrollment into the study was accelerated. They didn't just hit the target, they actually accelerated enrollment by about 11 weeks, which during a pandemic is absolutely incredible. So that she said that, I say that too, independently of her. This is an absolutely incredible achievement. And it wasn't just study team. And I think it's really important. So to recap from earlier, there are sort of three main categories um, of kind of initiatives that the Amgen team undertook. Good site selection, efficient study startup, and the use of study team. So maybe first among those, and I think we have that on the next slide here. Yeah, is the sort of good site selection piece. The feasibility that they conducted did prove to be a very high caliber. The site partners they worked with were very effective. They were very engaged throughout, and they focused on making sure they engaged sites that could contribute through this pandemic, and they were able to contribute patients from their own practices. During the study startup phase, they faced challenges that all sponsors on this call faced. They were able to start the study up efficiently, primarily due to their sort of pulling forward as many planning activities as possible, anticipating issues that they were going to see, and then mitigating those up front. And then they also had backup countries and backup sites identified, and they could pull that lever as needed if the pandemic sort of took off and there was a hotspot in a particular country or a particular area where they were relying on sites to participate in the study. And then the third initiative here around study team, from Riddy's perspective and her team's perspective, it proved valuable because it gave them real-time access to the data that has always been so challenging for them to collect. So they were able to see at a site and country level what was going on and what sites needed them to do to enroll more effectively. So they were able to actually use the information to make early decisions, informed decisions about site management, recruitment tactics they were deploying, the design of the protocol. They were actually able to jump in and see inclusion exclusion data, pre-screening data, and intervene and make protocol amendments quickly. It supported that kind of early identification of those pre-screening trends. And then the team was able to actually follow up promptly if there were sites on the study that weren't showing a lot of pre-screening activity. Instead of the Amgen CRAs calling every site every single week for the whole trial as sort of a blanket rule, they were able to use study team to have very targeted conversations with the sites that maybe needed their help. They were able to do that, get things unblocked at the sites, and do the kinds of things to help them. And they were able to use the study team data to also forecast better. So they were able to see, well, not just using screening and randomization data to forecast, using the pre-screening data to forecast and say, are we actually going to come in on time? And what kind of resources do we need to deploy globally to make sure there aren't delays 1 month, 2 months, 3 months from now as patients that are early in the recruitment process move into screening. And so this is kind of an overview of what they did at Amgen. And then, it's impossible for us to know, between these three tactics, these three different initiatives or areas of focus, exactly how much each one contributed. But we do work together, Amgen and Reify Health, on this study and others, to start to tease apart, well, what kind of impact is study team making? And so that's what we'll share a little bit on the next few slides. So one thing we look at, I mentioned study team is optional. And so we look at, when sites use study team, what happens? What kind of screening and enrollment activity do we see? We see an increase in patients randomized per site per month. On this study in particular, there's an 18% difference between study team and non-study team sites. We also see, again, the data were used to make an inclusion-exclusion amendment. Sites that are using study team can really quickly and efficiently go back and identify exactly which patients can be reconsidered after something like that happens. We hear from sites that study team helps them work together as a team more. And again, their CRAs are able to see what's going on and unblock them. So this is one of the key metrics that we look at. We also look at zero enroller prevalence or frequency. So it's, again, sponsors listening on the call right now, I promise you 0 of your sites ever want to be a zero enroller. And I promise you all of your sites work really hard to ensure that they are not. Unfortunately, it is impossible to predict whether or not patients at a site will ultimately choose to consent and then actually qualify to randomize or enroll in a study. What we do with study team, we don't make zero enrollers go away, so to speak. But we do give sponsors the ability to see what's going on and see which sites maybe are struggling or are blocked for one reason or another, and do the things that they need to do to unblock them, whether it's, again, like provide additional resourcing for additional reimbursement for chart review, or there are certain blockers at the site that maybe has them disengaged right now, and things the sponsor can jump in and help the site remove. And so we do see this on this study here. We saw 0 of the study team sites were zero enrollers, and 3 of the non-study team sites were zero enrollers. And so this is, we'll talk more in a moment about what we see across the work that we do together. But this is another thing that we focus on. And then the last thing here is more qualitative in terms of what we're showing here. We'll talk about the quantitative stuff in a moment. But we do measure what percentage of sites want to use study team. What is the site opt-in rate, if you will, and what do sites say? And so this is a quote from one of the sites on the study that captures a lot of what we think is really important. So we do want to make study team easy to use, and we want to give them one place to share information with sponsors that they're working with. And we want to make sure sponsors get the information they need. And then this last part of the quote is a really important component of what we do. As a site, when you're talking to your CRA, you share information with them, it is really impossible to know what happens with that information. And there's a game of telephone from CRA to a local team lead to a global trial manager that makes it really hard to control messaging. It also means that your CRA is coming in and sort of asking for qualitative updates week after week after week. Study team makes that whole process more objective. So CRAs come in with data, and they can start talking about solutions instead of kind of digging for data from a research coordinator calling off the top of his or her head, well, what happened? I'm not at my computer right now. It's more objective, it's more data-driven, and it helps build trust between CRAs and their sites, and helps build this really important relationship for the success of the study. And so these are some of the things that we've looked at, and we focused in this presentation here really on this one study, but we do want to kind of zoom out a little bit and talk about what we see across the Amgen portfolio too. And so some of those same metrics. So we've activated study team now on a number of studies, number of very broad array of therapeutic areas, indications, phases. And now over 1,000 sites on Amgen studies, now more than 20 countries, I think. And we're seeing the same stuff. So we're seeing the increase in patient per site per month randomization rate at the study team sites. We're seeing a reduction in zero enrollers, and we're seeing a very high site uptake rate. So right now across studies, 86% of sites choosing to use study team. And so again, this is important from our perspective to illustrate, like, this was not a sort of a one-off thing, but this study does really kind of represent how study team can be used, and how Amgen, in this case, used study team to help increase enrollment alongside some of the initiatives they have, and to do it in a way that maybe is a little bit less common, or has been less common historically in the industry. So again, so that is what we had planned to share. So I appreciate you guys bearing with me as I talked to you for 29 going on 30 minutes now. And we're going to open it up here to questions. Please do, again, ask questions of Riddhi, of Amgen. We will route them to her, but I might punt, or will punt a lot of those questions here today, but we'll focus on the ones that we can answer. So, but yes, thank you everyone for joining too.
Thank you very much, Ralph. And now we will turn it over to our moderator for the Q&A. He is Kent Seary, Vice President of Marketing with Reify Health.
Thank you, Elizabeth. As Ralph mentioned, we really appreciate everybody's time here, and we're sorry that Riddhi could not make it, but as I'm looking, there are a handful of questions that have come in real time, as well as some questions that came in as part of the registration process, some of which are directed specifically to Riddhi and the Amgen team, and so we'll defer on those, but there are a few here that we can start with that I think Ralph is more than capable of answering. So the first one, I think this could be relevant for both Ralph and Riddhi, but Ralph, if you want to take a pass. The question is, what metrics and measurements of success do you use and over what period of time?
Yeah. And so I think some of what actually is on the screen does speak to that. So we look at site randomization, we look at zero enroller rate. Those are, we refer to those as lagging indicators of success, lagging success metrics. Some of the more leading indicators of success we look at are very much site uptake, site usage, usage by sponsor staff, and then also reuptake by sites as well. So we also want to make sure that as sites use it, they continue using it and they find study team helpful, not just on the first study they use it, the first time you use it, but on subsequent studies as well. And so that allows us to get a feel for the things that are more upstream of these kind of lagging indicators. For some studies, enrollment timelines can be quite long, and so it can be we want to be able to get a sense for success faster than that together, both us and sponsors and us and sites. And so those are some of the things that we look at in addition to just the qualitative feedback that we're receiving from the users, which is in and of itself also incredibly important. So.
Great. I also did want to mention if you had a question that you didn't necessarily feel like sharing directly in the chat here, you can feel free to reach out to Ralph directly. His contact information is here in this slide if you want to send any questions directly to Ralph. But moving on to one of the other questions that we got during the registration process, how would a small independent clinical research facility access your services, presumably the study team services? Is it affordable for single sites to use Reify Health or study team to meet their recruitment goals?
Yeah. So in a sense, it's really easy. So actually, the answer to the affordable question is underline something I touched on briefly. Study team is free for sites, period. And so we want to ensure site staff that are doing all of this really important work have good, effective tools to help them do their job. We want to make study team as accessible as possible. And so to that end, a lot of sites we connect with for the first time when we're working on sites with sponsors. And then as a site, if you're listening here on the webinar, for example, if you go to reifyhealth.com, you can set up time. You can reach out to us. You can set up time to learn more about study team. And then from there, our site team can actually walk you through the process of getting set up on study team. And so happy to provide more detail about that as a follow-up. Also, you're welcome to email me directly, and I will ensure you get connected to the right people. But you can, and I know we had another question came in here, Kent, too, and I can just, this is related, and we can touch on it at the same time around implementation timelines. So how long it takes to implement study team at a site from the time they said they're interested in using the system. That time varies. So it varies based on how the site wants to approach study team implementation. And so if we are activating study team across all of the trials at the site out of the gate and having sort of a big rollout, that's a process that, on the very fast end can be, it takes about 2 to 3 weeks of coordination, but much more likely closer to a month plus. On the faster end, if we want to focus on specific studies and getting specific parts of the team up and running, that is a very, very short process. So it can be, and is same day for a lot of sites. And so it can be a very lightweight system to begin using and to get started with. And then our site team will work with you to begin to roll it out more and to more of your trials and programs across the work you do as a site.
Another question that came in, how do you enroll a trial that has a lower prevalence than common diseases but doesn't meet the criteria of a rare disease? Should enrollment strategies for rare disease be used here? Obviously, that's a question that Riddhi could answer, but Ralph, maybe you can provide a perspective there.
Yeah, I think I can speak at least explicitly to when we're working with sponsors that have trials of that type, how we focus on working together. I think in general, enrollment and sort of enrollment strategies, I sort of think about it like up front as a sponsor, you should be casting a wide net and thinking broadly about, and so the thing I'm saying right now is a very general sort of a generic thing, but implement a few different strategies and get good data back quickly and double down on the things that are working. And again, this is part of what we're trying to we use StudyTeam to help with that, specifically for studies that are on the more rare end but aren't specifically rare disease studies. We focus on using StudyTeam, at least, to ensure sponsors, instead of thinking about things in terms of the statistics of patient flow at the top of the funnel, focusing on it more as an absolute denominator. So make assumptions about what the funnel should look like or will look like. And then as we're getting sites up and running on StudyTeam, as quickly as possible, begin engaging those sites and have sites begin the process of identifying patients so that you can start to get a sense really rapidly for, do we have enough physical location? So there are more, there are certain solutions that involve kind of bringing patients from very far away to a specific location. But if we're in a more rare disease state, it's really important that you know really quickly, what am I working with the sites that I've already selected as quickly as possible. And so we focus on pulling forward that feedback loop as much as possible and using StudyTeam to help that. And that's an incomplete answer for sure, because I think Riddhi should definitely speak to that as well. But those are some of the things that we do and encourage the sponsors we work with to do.
And we'll make sure that we follow up with Riddhi specifically and get her perspective directly to whoever asked that question.
Absolutely.
So how does here's another question that came in. How does a solution like StudyTeam work if and when a study is using central recruitment and that recruitment company uses a separate portal for management of enrollment?
Yeah, and actually, Ken, I don't know, is it easy for you to go back to one of the funnel slides with the site and sponsor app? Because I think it might be helpful to illustrate that.
Yep.
There. So, and I can at least just I think my understanding of what the question is so a sponsor running a trial using StudyTeam, and then maybe the next one right after it, the slide here. Yep. So sponsors running a trial using StudyTeam, sites can and do use StudyTeam to track patients in their own practice, referrals from their kind of local networks, and then we actually have at Reify, one of the things that we've done, have invested in building an API, what we call our referral partner interface, where we actually partner with a patient recruitment company. And so there are several. There's a press release that we just announced with SubjectWell that's speaking to this type of partnership, where we work hand in hand with recruitment partners to actually ensure that patients are routed not to a separate portal, but directly into the site StudyTeam account, so that the patients that a site is managing from a referral partner are in the same place as the patients a site is following up with, managing, recruiting, pre-screening from their own practice. And that, so from our perspective, one, it simplifies things for the site because they have fewer places to go. Two, we know this handoff from referral partner to site is a challenge for everyone involved, even when everybody's trying their best to do that well. And so we are really focusing on improving that part of their patient recruitment process. And then we give the referral partner and sponsors great visibility into what is happening as patient, like throughout that entire process too, so that we can start to optimize it more effectively and optimize it together. And so it's something that we're really excited about. We've had some really positive feedback from sites that are using that on studies where the sponsor and the referral partner are using it too. And so, I think if anyone is interested in that too, either if somebody on the call is from a patient recruitment company or from a sponsor interested in that kind of partnership, I'm definitely happy to talk about it. And we've had seen some really exciting results with that so far.
Rob, there's a question that just came in that I think is pretty relevant to this last one from Antonietta. How do you differentiate from other recruitment platforms or recruitment tools?
Yeah, I think that I'll just sort of go back to the question the answer I just gave there and sort of underline a few key points. We are focused on making it possible for sites to recruit from as many places as possible, as many places they want, really easily, and do that in one place. But we as a company are not focused on getting really good at that very top of funnel sort of like patient recruitment activity, digital advertising, local advertising, things like that. there are companies that are very good at that. And so we're focused on partnering with them. And so I think that, I guess we think about what we do as very complementary to systems that are out there, and the sort of the center of the bullseye for us is very different than the center of the bullseye for companies focused on patient recruitment, referring patients to sites. And we want to help them, and we think we can help them and help our sites work more effectively together.
Fantastic. Can a solution like Study Team help to support sponsor goals related to diversity and inclusion for the study population?
Yeah, awesome question and very timely. So let's see. So I can tell you. So first, maybe so philosophically, this the topic of increasing diversity in clinical research, both in terms of the healthcare professionals participating as part of research site staff and in terms of the patient populations that we're recruiting, engaging, screening, enrolling. Very important for a lot of reasons. We believe at Reify Health there is sort of a unique contribution that we can make in this space. And so it's something we haven't really we haven't talked about publicly yet, but we are working with a couple of sponsors, and we're live working with sponsors and sites on a few studies looking at the patient population background, like the racial and ethnic makeup of certain patient populations in the United States right now on a couple of studies to see as patients are being considered, where are we seeing drop off? Where are we seeing, is it that we're just not engaging people at the very top end of the process? Is it that for one reason or another, patients from certain backgrounds are declining to participate? And so our hope there, our goal with this work is to give the sponsor and site teams that we work with information that allows them to say, here's where we need to focus. This is where we need to start problem solving here in this whole funnel, this whole process. And so wherever the question came from, is that something that's interesting to anyone on the call? I think for us, it's very timely. We are definitely interested in connecting with folks that are working in this space because it is something that I think we feel like we have a unique opportunity to add, to do our part here. And so we'd be interested in hearing from folks that are working in the space too.
There's a question that I think, again, there's a specific answer relative to Amgen, but maybe Ralph, you can speak more broadly. In which therapeutic areas is Study Team currently being used across the Amgen portfolio? And are there therapeutic areas for which Study Team is recommended?
Yeah, so I think I'll let Riddy answer the Amgen specific question. I definitely will say, like, we were rolling out very broadly at Amgen. At Reify Health, we currently now work in effectively all therapeutic areas. So vaccines were the kind of the one area that we had not until relatively recently started work in. So we work in all therapeutic areas. Site staff, so site operations, can be quite different from one indication or therapeutic area to another, but that's something we've spent a lot of time on is sort of understanding site workflows and understanding how maybe like an oncology site, academic medical center versus community clinic versus a gastroenterology site versus a primary care clinic would use the application in different ways. And so that's something so now as a company, we're working across therapeutic areas. We work across phases as well, absolutely, including phase 1 trials, even very small phase 1 studies. The use cases are a little different, and typically when we begin work with a sponsor, let's say, we focus more on phase 2 and phase 3 trials as a place to start. But then as we start to expand the work that we do together, we sort of cover the gamut.
Great. I know we're coming up on time, but there are just a couple more questions here. What internal resources, maybe this is also a question for Riddy, but what internal resources does a sponsor need to roll out a solution like Study Team?
Yeah, definitely. Whoever asked that question, we will ensure that one gets to Riddy. She can speak with high fidelity to what they did, what they were doing and have done. I think what I can speak sort of more generally to some of the patterns that we see. So I think we early on focused a lot on ensuring sponsors can get started with study team in a very lightweight way to sort of remove the activation energy from trying it, because it is a very new and different kind of product, both the side product and the sponsor product. And so what I'll say off the top there is I think that the volume of resource requirement, we have focused a lot on ensuring that it is as limited as possible, and the Reify Health team takes as much of that work on as possible. As we look at things, so at the level of an individual study, it actually is quite simple. There's global, regional, and very local, so CRA level staff that we think about. And we primarily coordinate with somebody at the global level, and then we sort of manage the regional and more local communications as part of our team. The interesting thing to sort of step back and look at is, as we think about rolling study team out, from the sponsor's perspective, across their portfolio more broadly, we have at this point we have a playbook that we can speak in depth about internally, but a couple of things to really call out. We focus really heavily up front on ensuring it's really clear who's responsible for what parts of the business, the different business units or therapeutic areas of the sponsor, who's going to be sort of the subject matter expert. And it is not a full-time job, but it is important that it's clear who that is. And they have some time devoted to rolling study team out and helping with that. And then we work with that sponsor across their different departments to make sure there's representation as we're doing sort of regular coordination with them. So from the different functions, some kind of vendor management or governance, clinical operations, patient recruitment, things like that. But those are some of the more general things I would say. And then I think we'll get that question to Riddy, and she can speak to some of the more specific details of how Amgen has kind of resourced the global expansion of study team there.
Awesome. And one last question, and it's a big one, touching on a pretty big topic that we'll make sure that Riddy has a chance to answer from her perspective. But Ralph, from your perspective, what innovations during the pandemic do you anticipate continuing as part of a standard approach to enrollment and clinical trial management going forward?
Yeah. So let's see. So I'm organizing my thoughts. I think that our observation, some of the things that we've seen, one, sponsors during the pandemic listened to sites very, very actively in a way that is very important for sponsors to carry forward. There is so let me tell a quick story. When I would go to investigator meetings, as we were just like launching study team, we'd go to the investigator meetings, and I found myself gravitating toward conversations with research coordinators pretty much exclusively, because that is where there's so much innovation happening at the level of each individual site and each individual study, where the site staff are problem solving for that sponsor's protocol. And one of the things that I observed during the pandemic very consistently is that sponsors really started not just asking questions, but really valuing the things they were hearing from research sites. And then I think some of the more, and so I would say, like, by far the first thing that I would bold, underline, italicize, and page break before. The second thing is it is very important for sponsors to listen to what sites are saying about their trials and about how they can help sites work more efficiently. The second thing that's a very kind of obvious trend, but it's worth calling out, sponsors are continuing to get increasingly comfortable communicating with sites remotely, working with sites remotely. So things like remote monitoring, obviously, but things like using the study team platform to be able to see what's going on in some of the site CRA conversations. Those things are happening more remotely, and not just remotely, but asynchronously as well. And so communicating between site and sponsor in this sort of virtual world, that is a trend that we very much expect to continue. And then I think there's obviously been a really large push toward caring for patients in their home, seeing patients in their home, seeing patients in more community settings. I can personally say that there is a lot of energy at sponsors to continue in that direction, and there should be. And I think that that particular thread is something where it's really important that once the pandemic is gone, once we remove this stressor, that whatever energy we built up, it has to be enough to carry us forward to actually keep pushing to make it possible for more healthcare professionals to be involved in research, more patients to have access to research, because that is the I think the meta solution to a lot of the enrollment challenges we see is really kind of at the access level. So those are my sort of off the cuff kind of synthesized comments, but also happy to hear others' thoughts offline too and talk more about that if folks are interested as well.
Great, and then one last one that I think is a pretty quick one, Ralph, is study team available globally?
Yes, yes it is, and so we are now available in over 100 countries, and we're sort of systematically rolling it out to sites and more and more countries. I believe we're somewhere between 60 and 70. I personally do not know the exact number of countries right now. Something I will say to every site who is listening on this call, if you are a site that is OUS, it is very important that your experience with study team is as good as sites that are in the United States. And I think something that we get wrong in clinical trial technology is catering to the people kind of locally around us, and often that means sites in the US. Obviously very important, doing a ton of incredible work. It's really important that we also understand how sites in Brazil feel and work, how sites in Japan work, how sites in Australia work, because there are different solutions that live there. And so I think I would just ask if we are fortunate enough to have any of our site colleagues from other countries, please do not be shy about telling us your country-specific workflows that you want us to support, because we care. And we want you to know that we care and want to hear about it and do something about it.
Wonderful. That is all the questions that we have here. Like I mentioned, there are a few that are very specific to Amgen that we will make sure get routed directly to Riddhi. And we will correspond directly with those question askers on her responses as soon as she is able. So with that, I want to thank everybody and pass it back to Elizabeth to wrap things up.
Thank you very much, Kent and Ralph. Yes, I would like to say thank you on behalf of Reify Health for attending today's event. And finally, I'd like to thank all of you who came and spent this time with us. We know you're very busy, and we're very grateful you chose to spend this time with us. So on behalf of Cambridge Health Tech Institute's SCOPE Global Web Symposia Series, thank you all so very much, and have a great rest of your day.